Can I please ask that everybody puts themselves on mute before we begin? And if there is any difficulty seeing the presentation or hearing, then if you could just put something in the chat and Abigail will pick that up. We're not exactly the most tech savvy, so we're doing it as best we can. So let's get started then. My name's Audrey Johnson. I'm educational psychologist, and today we're going to give a brief presentation about working with your child during lockdown. If I can just say at the start, we are recording this session because we want to make sure it is able to go to a wider audience, and it will be on our One Education website, and it will also be on the Parent Forum Network website. Okay? I can assure you that none of you parents will be recorded, and at the end, when we have a question and answer session, I will make sure that I stop recording then. Okay, but if you have any questions about that, just please put it in the chat. So just to briefly introduce myself, I'm an educational and child psychologist with One Education here in Manchester. And my job is I work to early years settings, to primary schools and to high schools throughout Manchester. Within our team, we're a large educational psychology team, we all have special areas of interest and of specialism. And one of my areas of working is to work to the early years sector. I'm going to hand over to Abigail now to introduce herself.
Okay. Hi, yeah, I'm Abigail Sterne. I'm a colleague of Audrey's. I'm also an educational psychologist. I used to be a teacher in a high school and work quite closely with children with special needs. And I work with children across the whole age range. But one of the things I do is I'm a link educational psychologist to the autism team at the Winnicott Centre. So I work quite closely with them. Okay, Audrey.
Right, I'm going to move on. So I'm going to go through just very briefly what we're going to cover today. The presentation today is geared towards children with special educational needs. Now, we are aware within that there's a huge age range from early years all the way through to high school. And what we've tried to do is we've tried to make sure that we put little bits of information that will cover all of the age groups. And the resources at the end will give links to the different age groups. Obviously, we have a very short time today, but we will try to cover as much as we can. Can I ask, we will have a time at the end for questions and answers. So if you have any questions or any comments during the presentation, just please feel free to put them in the chat, okay? And also, I just want to make sure that what we're talking about is children with special educational needs, but as you know yourself, a lot of the strategies, a lot of the support that we give to children with special educational needs can actually work for all children as well. So I'm going to go through very briefly what we're going to cover today, self-preservation. I think very important that we mention that top of the list. It's about looking after yourselves as parents. You will be able to support your child as best you can when you are feeling emotionally able to and you're feeling happy in yourself. Routines, the importance of routines, how to support learning, and we're going to talk a little bit about that. Motivation and praise, managing behaviour, which a lot of parents have commented to us is quite a challenge when trying to manage that at home. Attention and concentration. And then we've also got quite a few links at the end, which are going to give you advice and information of some of the resources and some of the websites that we mentioned throughout the presentation. And then, as I said, we're going to have a time at the end for questions and answers. Okay. And if I can move in, I thought it'd be quite nice to start with some quotes that I have that I asked from colleagues who are educational professionals, who are educational psychologists, who are teachers. And I think it's really important to have a look at these and to remember that regardless of what your job is, regardless of what you do, when you are working with your own child, it puts a particular strain and a particular stress, and everyone is in the same boat. The first quote there, I've just put myself in special measures, that was from one of our colleagues who was working with her year 3 child in the morning, and found it incredibly difficult. The second comment, it feels a lot harder this time around. Be kind to yourself. This is something that we've had back from so many parents. Gosh, you think back, it's almost a year now since that first lockdown in March last year. And here we are yet again. And a lot of people have said just how much more difficult it feels this time. We're fatigued, fearful, drained, and overwhelmed. And I think it's important to name that and to acknowledge it. No one is a perfect parent. Everyone is in the same boat and feeling the same feelings. And at times it can be stressful. At times it can be pleasurable and good fun. And at times it can be overwhelming. So I think it's important that we realise that you're not the only person. If you're having some of these feelings, you're not the only one. All parents have had similar feelings as well.
Audrey, can I interrupt?
Of course you can.
My slides aren't scrolling through, but that might just be mine. Can we just ask parents to let us know on the chat room if their slides are scrolling and keeping up with you?
Mine's not scrolling either. I'm having to tap it myself.
Oh, you're having to tap it yourself. Okay.
I'm scrolling myself as well.
Okay, right. Thank you. So if any parent, if you're thinking, what is she talking about? Can you please then scroll through yourself? Yeah.
Okay. So we're now on slide 3. So we're going to have to announce it when we're moving on. So we're about to move on to slide 4.
No, we're about to move on to slide 5.
No, 4.
Okay. Self-preservation.
We've just got to the end of slide 3.
Right,
yeah.
okay.
So the next slide is going to be self-preservation.
Right, okay. So yes, that's right. Thank you, whoever that was, for keeping me right. Okay, can you see me? Can you see the slides? Right, okay, there we go. So, and I think we've already said before, there's a pressure this time. There's an increased pressure on teachers to produce the Zoom chats, the Zoom calls, the Zoom lessons. So obviously then this pressure is going to be passed on to parents. So be realistic about what you can and can't achieve. Learning at home will also be stressful for your children as well as yourself. So try to prioritise well-being, not how many tasks you've got completed, or more importantly, how many tasks haven't been completed. Try to focus on you and your child or your children being in an okay place. And if that means then not completing 1 or even 2 of the tasks, then that be that as it may. And I think it's important here to say that the teachers are there to support and help. So they will appreciate having feedback about what's not being completed and what has been completed. Remember, this is a completely different situation for the teachers as well. When you're doing a lesson, and I taught for 15 years in a primary school, when you're doing a lesson, you're actually checking out when you have the children in front of you through their facial expressions, through how they're responding, are they engaged? So you're checking out continually that they have understood the material you presented. The teachers don't have that feedback when they're not face to face with them in the classroom. So it is important to keep in contact with your teacher and let them know what your child can and cannot do as well. Stay calm. We all know that children are feeling increased stress and pressure from working at home. This is not their usual way of working. And how children communicate how they're feeling is generally through their behaviour. So what you may be finding is that there will be increasing challenging behaviour from them. And I know a lot of us are living in cramped accommodation where it used to be maybe 1 people, 2 persons at home. Now you've got the whole family trying to work at home. Try to find a space where you can give yourself, even if it's just a couple of minutes, time out and a little bit of space. One parent said to me, the only time I get a space is when I lock myself in the toilet, if I'm going to the loo. And again, just you find your way of actually taking a deep breath and then going back and dealing with it, and choose your battles. This is what we're trying to do now is parents and children are trying to deal with an unusual, not a normal situation. So pick your battles, what would usually you might not tolerate. Try to see what you can tolerate and what you can let go. And what, obviously, there are some things that you won't be able to let go. Keep it in perspective. I read recently about a young person who was living in a country with the civil war and missed 4 years of their education. That child then went on to go to university. So I think it's important, although it's difficult because we become very conscious of what the child's not doing, what they're not completing, to celebrate what you have done. And remember that everyone is having the same experience of missing out, of not having the full access to their learning at this time. The last point there, consult your own support network. It's really, really important that you have either an adult at home or somebody that you can call or somebody in your support bubble that you can vent your frustration. We're all only human beings. This is not an ideal situation. It's okay to be angry, to be frustrated, and to let that out in a safe way with somebody that you can trust and that knows you and that will understand. We're all only human and we're dealing with this situation. So give yourself time and space to say, this is not okay. I've not done a good job today, or I did a great job today, or I'm feeling angry. That's healthy. These are all normal, healthy emotions, and give yourself space and time to let them out. I'm now on to slide 5, routines. Routines are really, really important for children. And when you think about what their school day is like when they're in the school environment, it's very clearly structured and delineated about what they're going to do at certain times throughout the day. Working at home, it's really important that we try to stick to some of these routines, and this will help create less stress for the young person and the child. So maybe try to think about being dressed and not in pyjamas. It's important. This is work time, so we get ready for work. We're in our clothes, we're getting dressed, and we're coming ready to work. Again, it's not rocket science. Make sure they've had something to eat and drink, and that could be incorporated. Many schools have breakfast clubs, so this could be incorporated into the routine. Make sure you've had breakfast. Then what is next? Then we get ready to do our work. I've already mentioned about the fact that none of us have the ideal living situation where we can then have 3, 4 additional people working at home and additional workspaces, but try to create a small workspace for your child, even if it means if you've got 2 or 3 children at home, alternating between it's work time for this child and then it's work time for that child, so that there is a space with it, if possible, a table space and a clear space for them to work. Again, it's really important as well that they have a little bit of what they like, a little bit of schoolwork and a little bit of helping out at home. This won't only help encourage their independence, but you're also helping them by giving them little household chores to do. You're also copying what is happening at school. When they're in the classroom, they also may have different tasks to do. Give out the textbooks, you're on lunch duty, give out the water bottles. So children will be used to having these tasks within the classroom environment as well. We have said about defined sessions with start points and end points, and sometime, if at all possible, even in this weather, for outdoor physical activity. I'm going to come back to that. We've got some resources that we'd like to share about using visual schedules. And remember, for younger children, it's really, really important to have lots of time for play, relaxing time and work time. If you think about the school, in the school, a child is moving about quite a lot. So when they're at home, you may think that they sit down at the table or at the workspace for 30, 40 minutes. But actually, even in the classroom, they have probably regular movement breaks. They might get up to collect a pair of scissors, they might get up to collect a textbook, so they're moving about quite a bit. And what we know again and again from research and from evidence, is that movement helps the brain focus and concentrate. So it's really important to try to keep that in mind and to give your child regular movement breaks, even if it's standing up, jogging on the spot, touching their toes, going to get something from the kitchen, going to get something, moving about, having playtime outside in the garden for 5 minutes. Even if it's raining, put on a raincoat and go outside. So try to incorporate that as much as you can. We've got here using visual schedules. I'll come on to talk about that in a minute. And also allowed your child to choose when to do activities. This isn't about letting your child be in charge and be in control. This is about, as would happen in the school and in the classroom environment, involving them in making choices about the activities that they have to do throughout the day. I am now moving on to slide 6. Is anybody following at all? Is it going itself, or is it still not going itself? Abigail?
Audrey, Jordan can scroll forward as well, so he's also going to scroll for us, I think.
Right.
But
okay,
mine's going automatically.
Yeah, that's Jordan taking control, so that's great. Thank you.
Okay, good. So I don't need to do it then, because I'm doing anyway, right? What I've got here in slide 6 is a visual timetable. And this is something that can be downloaded. We've given you resources, Sparklebox, Twinkle, and all of these resources can be downloaded and used. Now, this is quite a complex one that I've put here. It's got the days of the week, and it's got quite a few sections that can be completed throughout the day. This kind of visual timetable is something that all children, special needs, early years, all the way through to high school will be used to. These are very commonplace within the classroom. You have to think very carefully about the needs of your child and adapt it and use it that would best suit the needs of your child. So it may be that for a child with quite early years or quite severe learning needs, you might have 3 slots on Monday, and it might be 3 activities that the child has to do, 2 before lunch and 1 after lunch. And it might be using a visual, and we'll show you some of the visuals afterwards. It could be that you've drawn a sketch, or it could be a photograph or a picture. With an older child or a more able child, it might be 1 word. It might be maths, literacy, games, computer. It could be single words. And for a high school child, or for somebody that's working with exams or exam preparation, it could be quite a detailed schedule of what they have to do each section of each day of the week. Okay. What we've done here is we've downloaded some of the visuals from, this is twinkle.co.uk. So say, don't worry about taking this down. All these resources will be there at the end. And this shows you some of the things, what we said earlier is about involving your child in the daily routine as well. So some of the things, it might be helping with the cooking, it might be dinner, all of the things, brushing their teeth, getting breakfast. All of these things are things that have to be done throughout the day, and they can be incorporated into the school plan. When, again, these visuals are something that every single child will be familiar with. When using these visuals, I would suggest using them, and either many children at school have them on their desks, or they have them on a place in the wall that's near their table, or you could even put them on the fridge. And it's very important that the child is actively involved. So it may be that there are 3 or 4 things to be completed throughout the day. And as each thing is completed, the child takes the visual off, physically takes the visual off and puts it down. And that signifies that that activity has finished. And here's
Can I just add, sorry, Audrey, I was just going to add that visual timetables work particularly well with children with autism, because what they really like, you know, and this is of all abilities, what they really like is for things to be as predictable as possible. So if they know that they'll be doing something and then there'll be something else after, and if they do have a reasonable sense of time and they know that's going to be finished by a certain amount of time, that usually takes away some of the anxiety about the day. Sorry, Audrey.
No, that's fine. And I was going to say, it was Abigail actually that mentioned this, reminded me of this, the app Pomodoro, which is for older children. It's an app you can download, well, they can download onto their phone. So the behind that is the assumption that people, adults and older children, can concentrate for a maximum of 25 minutes. But that's a really good app, Pomodoro. I'm not sure if we've got that in the resources. If not, then Abigail can put that in for you in the chat so you can have a look at that. And it's a really good app to download for older children. I'm going to show you this now and next board again for children with attention and focus difficulties, for children with ADHD, for very young children or children with special educational needs. This is about the now is the learning activity, the learning task, and the next is a high interest motivational activity for the child. So it could be, I can think of one, so now might be literacy or a maths task, and next might be Play-Doh, Lego, an activity that the child finds fun and interesting. It's important though not to get bogged down with the now. So what I would suggest is look at what your child is capable of. I would say no more than 5 minutes for the now. So what you don't want is for this to be counterproductive, and after 30 minutes say, well, you've not finished the now, so you're not moving on to the next. Be realistic. This is about developing your child's self-confidence, their self-esteem, and getting them to understand the routines, as Abigail had said, the routines and what comes first and then what comes next. Now, I would be suggesting 5 minutes for some younger children, or for some children who attention and focus is a real challenge. I wouldn't be afraid to start at 1 minute. And then what you're doing is you can build up from there. You're obviously not going to stay at 1 minute for the full all the time, but then you slowly build up until you're increasing that time that the child is on the now activity before they move on to the next activity. Use visual timers. You can use an app on your iPad, so visually you can see. At school they would maybe use practical sand timers, but use what's available within your house. All phones have got an app for keeping the time. What do you call it? A stopwatch. For very young children, it might be when the big hand using something very visual. When the big hand gets to there, then you can stop and we can move on to next. And this is a really nice thing to use, again, used in so many schools. The child is involved in planning what they would like to do next, what they would like to choose as their activity for when they're finished the learning activity.
Can I just say that Audrey, can I just say that this now and next sheet I downloaded, I took a snapshot, a screenshot from the Twinkle website. So you just have to go onto the Twinkle website and register. The reference is at the end of this. It's in the presentation. Just register on the website, and then you've got access to a whole load of free materials. That, I mean, if you've got a printer at home, you could print it. Otherwise, you know, there's nothing wrong with you just making your own. You know, just copying it onto a piece of paper. You don't have to. You know, you don't have to have anything super smart.
I think Twinkle and Sparklebox are absolutely fab. If you go into Sparklebox as well, there's so many resources for special educational needs. And Abigail's spoken about autism, children with autism, and there's loads of resources on there. Even things like the visuals that are used for going to the toilet. Simple things. What you do when you go to the toilet, all the routine for washing your hands and all the way through. So that's a really, really great resource. And as Abigail says, all of these resources are at the end. Here we've got some choice boards. Again, we've got tasks to complete, but again, you're negotiating with your child. These are the tasks we have to do. What will we do first? then what will we do, and then what will we do? So you're giving the child some element of choice and control. And again, this is also what happens within the school as well. You're not offering your child something that they won't be used to, or something that they're not used to working with. Okay. Now I've kind of skimmed. Have you got any comments to make, Abigail? I've gone through that quite quickly. Anything about the visuals that we've...
No, I think, and I know when I was chatting to one of our colleagues who's working with children at home, she does say she finds it really helpful to sit and work out with her daughter to get sort of her to agree what they're going to do that day, because it just gives that child a feeling that they've got some control over this. So I think if with a young child, if you've got one of these My Choices board, but in its own way, I think it works with older ones as well. If you can say, well, these are the things that have to be done today, what order do you want them to be done in, and when do you want your breaks? It just gives them a little bit of feeling of control, which is, in these times, this is what's so tough for so many kids, is they feel they've lost control of so many things. So giving them choices where you can, I think, just helps them.
And as I say, it's something that's done at school. Teachers are very good at this, at understanding that children need to have some element of choice and control over their learning. That's not to say that tasks haven't to be completed, but the child has some element of control over it and choice. What I want to talk about is what is learning and how to support learning. I think when you're at home just now with your child, it's very easy to get bogged down with the learning tasks that have come home from school. And that's great, and they obviously provide a real purpose and a content, the curriculum content for the child. I think it'd be really helpful for us to think, especially at this time, about learning in its widest form. And I'm going to use the word metacognition. And metacognition is just a fancy way of saying thinking about thinking. And that's such an important skill for children to learn. Even if I'm writing up a report that's going back to a school and I may be giving strategies, one of the important strategies I will be giving back for the schools and for the child is to encourage the child to think about how they learn. And we do that all the time as adults. So, for example, I know how I learn. I know what I need to keep my learning. I know that when I go shopping, I need to write a list because that helps me remember. So I understand how I think and how I learn. And this is such an important skill for your child to learn. Not only does it help with their learning, but you think as an adult, it helps them as they develop and progress as an adult, because it helps them understand themselves and helps them think about, what do I need to keep me happy? So that's a very general. So it's very important that your child learns these skills. And if we think about it, what it is the metacognition is thinking about how we plan, organise and sequence our learning. So planning, organising and sequencing is what the brain does when it gets any piece of information. And how you can do that with your child at home is probably what you're doing every day as well. Right, getting up in the morning, what do you do first? First, I need to get dressed. What do you put on first? So you need to organise your clothes. What do I need? I need my pants, my socks, my trousers, my shoes. So all of these things, the brain is planning, organising and sequencing. So when you are doing activities with your child at home, use language, talk to your child about everything about what they're doing. What are we doing first? What do we need to do next? When you're getting ready to learn, what do you need to learn? We need our pen, we need our pencil, we need our rubber. For older children, it might be compass, calculator, so that the child's brain is planning, organising and sequencing all of the things that they need before learning can take place. This can be done through a baking activity at home, looking at a recipe, planning what you need, organising and then baking. For an older child, it could be organising a meal. It could be even making the meal as well, thinking about what you need to buy from the shops to make the recipe. So there's so many ways that you are developing that your child's learning skills, probably without even thinking about it. And especially for children with speech and language difficulties, this is so important. It's such a language-rich opportunity to be using language at a simple level and using language like, first we need this, then we do this, next we do that, that you are helping the child sequence information. If you think about a literacy task, writing a story in the classroom, what is the child doing? They're planning, they're having to organise and sequence. A maths problem solving task in the classroom, the child is having to plan, organise and sequence. Plan, think about, problem solve. What do I need to do here? Is it addition? Is it subtraction? Is it multiplication? Is it division? So many ways you are teaching your child how to approach learning and how to problem solve. And it takes away from that, I'm good at this, I'm bad at that. It takes away that attitude and brings a more problem-solving attitude when faced with a new learning situation. I also think it's really, really important to remember, those of you with younger children at home, children in many European countries don't actually start formal learning until they're 7 years old. So keep that in mind as well. And we speak about learning play in the classroom. So if your child is in reception or if your child has special educational needs and they have a play-based curriculum, play is so important for learning. Turn taking, sharing, language, using number, using sound, using letter across different contexts. Even doing a puzzle, an insect puzzle or a puzzle, Lego, you're using and developing fine motor skills, and all of that is necessary for developing your finger hand strength for going on to writing skills. So please remember that learning is not just sitting down and doing a worksheet. It's all the other things, all the rich environmental things that you can do with your child at home. Right, I'm going to give over to Abigail now, slide 12.
Okay, so we're on the motivation and praise slide. And yeah, just again to reinforce, I think that point that it always makes me think that although we hear, you know, for example, countries like Scandinavia, their children don't start formal school till they're 7, and yet their outcomes are often amongst the best in the world. It's not the case that they're not educating their children till 7, but what they do, and what I think is proven good practice, is they're going out and they're doing lots of what we call experiential learning. And what that experiential learning is going out and learning by doing and learning by talking. And, you know, there's a strong line of thought in education that, you know, children, up to the age of 7 and even beyond do very well indeed by developing their skills in that way. And probably it's a much better approach often than, say, sitting them down with worksheets. So don't feel that if your child isn't sitting there doing a worksheet, that they're not doing proper learning, because there are so many different ways that you can do learning completely through games and finding things out and practical experiences. Okay, so I want to now think about motivation and praise, and I think it's such a crucial part of education, this is, and yet it can be overlooked, and especially because it's tough at home, it's stressful, people often feel on edge. It can be something that can get a little bit forgotten. So I think we all know the theory of this. We all know that children respond well to praise and they like being rewarded for things they do well. And everybody likes praise. You know, if as adults, if we do something well at work, or if we cook a nice meal for the family, it's really nice when people notice that and when people respond and say something positive. So we all know the theory, but I think it also can be something that can be quite difficult to put into practice, especially if everybody's feeling stressed. But it is something that's so important. And sometimes we just say, well, try and for every negative, maybe try 3 positives, because we know that positive reinforcement will bring about more change than criticism, negatives. There's no doubt about that. So just a little example, you could either say you're not going on the iPad until you've written 4 sentences, bit negative, or we could say, well, when you've done these 4 sentences, then you can have 10 minutes on the iPad. It's the same message, but it's a different way of expressing it. And as I say, self-monitoring, and just have that in mind, that they will learn better with praise than with negatives. They always, I remember at the start of educational psychology training, somebody said, well, negatives and criticisms are quite effective in immediately stopping a behaviour. But if you want to teach a different behaviour, usually positives are much more helpful. Telling somebody what they're good at and that they're making progress with this, and they could make it, they could do even a little bit more, is likely to work better. 1 or 2. So as I say, we know sometimes that can be difficult. Another thing is to make praise explicit and meaningful. And it might be, if a child is struggling with something, just find the tiniest step of progress and notice that. So when I say make it meaningful, rather than, oh, well done, you've done, that's good, be quite clear about what you're praising. So you wrote that sentence really well, or that's a great idea, I really like that. And then talk about the idea and follow it up. Or just notice the progress. You couldn't do that last week, but you can now. That's fantastic. Or you've remembered that really well. We did that a couple of days ago, and you've still retained that. That's fantastic. So find the smallest thing, and it really does make a difference in relationships. I remember as a class teacher, I think it's something that you learn quite quickly, that a little bit of praise, especially to the more challenging children, the ones with behaviour difficulties. But if you notice the things they are getting right and the times they are doing well, you can really change, improve your relationship with them. Also, validate the frustrations. Acknowledge the difficulties, acknowledge the negative feelings, acknowledge that this is a really difficult thing they're going through, this home education. I can see that you're trying your best, and this is really tricky. Or I'm wondering what I can do to help you. So take some of the responsibility, and you can even, say, look, if you're not understanding that, I'm obviously not doing a very good job explaining it. So you're the adult, they're the child. Try and take on some of that responsibility. I'll talk about motivation. And there is, well, in psychology, you learn about intrinsic motivation, and that is, in a way, what are you getting personal pleasure from? It's that intrinsic motivation is about a natural drive and curiosity. Or the extrinsic motivation is you're motivated by a reward. Okay, so you're motivated in a way to please the teacher, things like that. And in an ideal learning situation, you want the intrinsic motivation. You want the child to be motivated by the task for itself. So, when I was at school, I loved learning languages. I always wanted to travel. So I was very intrinsically motivated to learn languages. But I was far less motivated in, say, my physics lessons. So I might, to get my physics homework done, I might have needed a bit of extrinsic motivation in terms of rewards and so on. And I think it's useful to think about this when you're home educating your child, because if you can work out what motivates them and bring that into their learning, they're much more likely to want to do the learning. So although school might be setting a certain type of task, if your child's mad about dinosaurs, and you've probably worked this out already for yourself, the more you can bring dinosaurs into that activity, the more likely the child is to engage with it. I don't know if I'm sure some of you would be able to come up with good examples of that. But the more fun they're having with learning, the more motivation, the more likelihood is there of is of success.
Can I just add something?
Please do.
Yeah, what I was going to say is actually, when we showed you the visual charts, I've seen some teachers do this really skillfully. If, for example, your child is into Frozen, sorry, my children are older now, so I don't know many of the characters that are relevant now for young children, but use that. So if it's Postman Pat, Thomas the Tank Engine, Spider-Man, try to have a picture of that on their visual schedule or on their chart. And teachers use that, and it's quite motivating for the child. That's their Spider-Man chart, that's their Batman chart. Yeah, sorry.
Okay. And then just a little bit of a few ideas about rewards. Again, we know children like to receive rewards, and when you're working with the under sevens, usually behaviour charts and star charts and so on work quite nicely. With the older ones, it usually needs to be something a little bit more tangible than that. What we often say to teachers when you're using behaviour charts is rather than just a star for being good, if you're trying to change a particular behaviour, maybe focus on that behaviour. So if your child, for example, is really struggling to sit down for more than 2 minutes and you'd like to try and extend that to 4 minutes, you could get your star chart could be about them, seeing if they can sit down for more than 2 minutes, and every time they do, reward it with a star. And another little tip would be, once you've awarded a star or whatever, I've seen in schools sometimes, if it's, say, a marble in a jar, you can lose the marble if you're then behaving badly. But I would try and avoid doing that. Keep the sanction separate from the reward. So once they've got the reward, they can't lose it. And then usually your star chart will accumulate in another reward. Now, if you've got a child who's got severe learning difficulties or sometimes severe ADHD, usually they respond much better to an immediate reward. Some children just can't wait for the number of required rewards to mount up, and they like something just immediate. So you will know your child, but just have a think about what rewards work best. Praise works for most children, but sometimes it'll be a bit of time on the iPad. Sometimes it's 5 minutes just one-to-one with a parent they absolutely love. And obviously there are, I suppose, the more obvious ones like computer games and so on. But these rewards should not be expensive. It is a token for what they have done well. Okay, I'm going to move on now to managing challenging behaviour. It's, I know we're saying it a lot, but it's really tough times for children at the moment. Many children are feeling uncertain, they're feeling anxious, they're feeling frustrated. And so in a way, it's hardly surprising if they're not behaving particularly well at the moment. And as families, we've all got the stress of being cooped up together, spending far more time together than you normally would. Feeling cross, feeling upset, feeling frustrated is, in a way, a normal and healthy part of life. And it's perfectly normal if a child's behaviour is more challenging at this time. And of course, children will express how they're feeling through their behaviour. But it's also really hard for parents. It can be exhausting, it can be demoralising, and persistent challenging behaviour is really hard for both you and your child. So I suppose, one thing would be do make a special effort to pick up and name some of the positives. Try to establish clear routines. I know Audrey's spoken about that already, and try and establish clear boundaries, and do try and follow through on consequences. And I think we've all done it. We've got so frustrated, you name a consequence which, as it's coming out of your mouth, that's ridiculous and there's no way you can ever possibly carry it out. But where possible, try and give consequences that are sort of in proportion to what the child's done. And usually, if it's going to be time out for very young children, it just needs to be a minute or two, and so on. You'll know what works for your child, but try and be consistent and do try and keep clear boundaries. And I think we would be the first to acknowledge that's much easier said than done. I think another important thing that can get lost is that when your child is in a heightened state of frustration and is angry, then is not the time to talk about what's gone wrong or to talk about what they've just done. And I'm going to talk about this in a minute a bit more, but you can't reason when you're agitated, and the child won't be able to reason when they're agitated. So if they're shouting and screaming, it really is best for everybody to have a breather and walk away, and for you as a parent to try and stay calm and not react back and not argue and just give each other some space. And the time to talk about what went wrong is later, when you're both back to being calm again. So it can be really helpful to children to name the feeling. So, if you say, I can see you're feeling angry and frustrated, or you're really restless, take a break. Look, it's just not a good time to discuss it now. And it can help to be a bit like a broken record, but you did this. Look, it's not a good time to discuss it now. Look, really, I'm not going to talk about it now, and just be quite clear about that. And if you manage to stay calm, usually that helps them to calm down. So it helps so as I say, that, if you can have in mind it's a broken record, no, I'm not going to talk. Help your child to understand their feelings, name them. And I think it's helpful also to explain what's happening. I can see that you're shaking. I can see that you're sweating. You're obviously really upset, and that again helps them make a little bit more sense of it. And then I would say, try not to sweat the small stuff. So I think, at the moment when people in everybody in families is getting everybody else's nerves, try some tactical ignoring. Don't sweat the small stuff. It's really hard. And let's just go on to the next slide. So I'm on now a child's responses to perceived threat. So I think what I'm going to do is, if you want, you can use the chat here. What a psychological threat? Let's think now about what are psychological threats right now to young children during home teaching. What do you think makes them anxious? If you want to put a few ideas on the chat, feel free. What for your child would you say poses a threat to them? What might just really raise the heckles? And I'm just not sure if I can look on the chat here. Has anybody say? No, I can't. Or if you don't want to put it on the chat, maybe just have a think about. I can look
on Abigail.
Okay. Okay. So I'm just going to give you a minute or so to think what might be a threat to your child during home teaching. Okay, well, I'm going to make some suggestions. Yeah, as somebody said here, not being able to do a task, and yeah, I think that's a really common one. They've been given some work by school and they just can't do it, and there's no teacher there to explain it, is there? So that's certainly a threat. Here's somebody saying reading. Oh, siblings in the background being loud, definitely. Yeah, and mum, I'm not the teacher. That's frustrating. Not friendly with mum, they're far better with the teacher. Yeah, and none of you are, you're not teachers, so that's really understandable. It's too hard, I can't understand it. Okay, that's fantastic, thank you. So these are all psychological threats. The annoying sibling, the annoying parent, can't do the work. There's no perfect space for everyone at home. There's no easy solution, is there? So I want to just think about how we as human beings respond to threats. And again, we're talking about, I suppose, evolutionary psychology. So if you imagine in prehistoric times, you'd got man living in a cave and suddenly they're faced by a saber-toothed tiger. And you've really got three options. They could fight back, sort of fight the tiger, fight the threat. You could flight, that means run away, hope the tiger isn't going to catch you, or you freeze, and that means, I suppose, play dead and hope the tiger doesn't notice you. And that was a response to a physical threat. Now, we as human beings still have these fight, flight, freeze responses. So when we're now faced with a psychological or an emotional threat, our bodies are primed to respond in a fairly similar way. So if you think about a child who is really, really wound up and frustrated by the emotional threat of not being able to do the work, if they were in school, they may well fight back, and that might be being like hurling abuse at somebody. It might even be being physically aggressive. Flight, they may just do a runner or try and get out of the situation. We see a lot of children hiding under the table, or they might just freeze. And I suppose that could be things like giving up, ignoring what's going on around them, just switching off to the work. And these are all very natural responses to an emotional threat. And sometimes they're not even really conscious decision. It's the body sort of taking over and saying, well, this is what I'm going to do now. So if we think about it, let's imagine we're driving along in a car and we're along on the motorway and another car swerves in front of us. Your brain has no time to think about what you have to do. You've got to respond almost immediately and slam the brakes on. So what happens is, in a way, the thinking brain almost shuts down, and you then respond automatically. And I think it's useful to know this, because so when there's a really severe threat, your brain can't really think anymore. Your more basic responses take over. And at the same time, the body response to things like you start breathing faster, your heart rate increases, because your body's priming yourself because of this threat. Your muscles tense, you sweat, you might, and so on and so on. Now, in a way, this isn't too different to the threat when something's gone horribly wrong or your sibling has wound you up. Your body is responding in the same way and you're getting angry, but your brain can't think about it very clearly. So again, it's sort of going back to what I'm saying before, that you're on the emotional part of the brain, but your thinking part of the brain is closing down. And there's a good reason to do this, because you have to respond straight away. So again, what do? You don't engage in any sort of discussion, but you think about how you're going to de-escalate, how you are going to calm your child down. So again, it could be something like, well, I can see you're angry, we need some time out. Or if it could well be that in a sense you're mirroring the child. Your child's angry, they've done something quite serious, you're angry too. So it might be you need to say, well, I can see you're angry and I'm getting angry too. So we need some time out. And you're mirroring your child's response, which can be helpful. I think another way of looking, if we go on to the next slide, and you can see what we call the anger graph. And I think this also illustrates it quite well, that if you look at the bottom line, which is your sort of calm behaviour. And then if something's making you angry, quite often there is a bit of a trigger phase and you can see the anger escalating. So your sibling who's getting on your child's nerves more and more and more, or a piece of work that your child is finding hard, and you can see that it's really getting to them because they've done one and they couldn't do that and they can't do the next question either. So things are escalating to that crisis phase, which is the peak of the graph. So what you'd ideally do is intervene before it gets to that crisis phase, because by that time there's no reasoning anymore. Try and take control. So you're going to be talking calmly and firmly. Stop that now, or put that down. And again, go back to the broken record. No, we're not going to talk about it. I can see you angry. Put that down. Take some time out. Very calmly, and you're trying to de-escalate it. You'll know what helps, or you should be able to work out what can help your child then calm down again. If you look at that next phase, which is the plateau or recovery phase, the difficulty is that it's very easy for the child to be triggered again. So then they have some possible additional anger spikes. So again, you want to try and avoid that. And again, usually that's going to be by taking the annoyance away and letting them calm right down. And then towards the end of it, you'll see the graph sort of dips below the baseline, and that can be the sort of depression phase, because it's, you know, I think we all know at some stage nearly everybody has really lost the plot at some point, and afterwards you can feel terrible, and it's sort of humiliating, and it's humiliating for children, you know, especially when they are in school. It's really humiliating to really lose your temper. So children then usually need a bit of encouragement and positives to sort of calm down again, and because they're likely to be quite distressed about what's happened. So I hope that's helpful and gives you a few thoughts about managing challenging behaviour. We do use some of these ideas when we work with teachers in school. My next slide is about attention and concentration difficulties. This affects an awful lot of children with special needs, and also academically able children have ADHD diagnoses and can find it very difficult to concentrate. So there's a huge variety in how long children can focus and what they can focus on. And it's important that you take into this what you know about your child and when do they concentrate best and how long can they concentrate for. And if you're getting work that takes a huge amount of real focused learning, but you know that your child can't do more than 2 or 3 minutes at a time, then I think you really have to trust your gut feeling. You as parents know your child better than anybody else. But you also might have an idea about when are they likely to concentrate best, you know, especially when it comes to teenagers. Some are very, very difficult to get going in the morning, whereas for a lot of people, that's when they're at their best. So have a think about when your child is at their best to work. Most children will certainly not work well if they're hungry and haven't had any breakfast. We talked about, I've talked about motivation and rewards. And I often say to teachers with children with ADHD, quite often they don't do so well with delayed rewards, and what they need is something quite immediate. I think there's something here, if your child doesn't want to do the task. It's a tricky one, because there will be some tasks children don't want to do. Again, I would say maybe, trying to work out what reward they will be for doing it. And then if you can get them onto a task they don't want to do and they're making a tiny bit of progress, or even just reward them for the fact that they've been willing to have a go at it, that may help. If it's a task they really don't want to do because they just feel it's completely impossible, you might want to speak to the teacher about that. Remove distractions. I know that's obvious, but sometimes, even if you've got them seated next to a window and they're constantly looking out the window what's going on outside, it might be worth putting them, facing them the other way, not having anything on the table about the thing apart from the things they need for their learning. Try and again make your language positive. So, let's look at this. This looks like an interesting problem, rather than stop looking out of the window. Do give them ample breaks to move about, to relax. Some children, you may be aware in schools these days, for children who have attention difficulties, sometimes they're given a piece of blue tack to mess with, or a fidget spinner, and that can really help them focus. Some children do actually need something to be fiddling with to focus. So don't automatically assume you have to take that, everything they're fiddling with away. Some children absolutely need to move around. It's in a way part of an ADHD diagnosis is this, that they have a need to move around and keep busy, and the body needs to be active. So it's not always the case that you have to stop them doing that, and sometimes stopping them doing that will actually prevent them from learning. Audrey's mentioned the use of timers and time tasks. And yes, if just a countdown timer, if your child can make sense of numbers and has a sense of time, the timer on a phone can be really useful so that they know that after such a time that the alarm's going to go off, and then they can have their break. And as Audrey mentioned, the Pomodoro's app is good for this. the visual schedules can help them focus, because they know, they can see that there's going to be an end to that task, and then they're going to move on to their preferred task. And computer learning often really helps children with attention difficulties, because quite often the computer, you know, some of these education programs, the computer provides a reward. They can see the answers immediately. They're not having to wait for an adult to check if it's right or wrong. So some of the computer programs, and again, check with your school whether they've got anything, are really good. And then I think lastly, I'd say avoid flogging a dead horse. And by that I mean, if your child is showing clearly that they have lost the plot, there is nothing, you know, the tank's empty, really do avoid trying to make them sit down and do any more learning, because it's probably just going to cause more problems than it's worth. I'll go on to talking about teenagers. I think for teenagers, lockdown is particularly difficult. You know, for teenagers, they're at the age where you know, the most important thing to a lot of them is social contact, and that's what they haven't got, which is live social contact. And you've got the added pressure that for this lockdown, a lot of teachers in schools are under pressure to broadcast regular quality live lessons and to monitor engagement and so on. So teachers are feeling under a lot of pressure. And they're, in addition to having to teach some key worker children, they're having to juggle the demands of the children that are in school with the demands of providing online learning. So I think the point I'm making is that the pressure on teachers can easily be passed on to you parents to try and follow a schedule with your child. One of my colleagues is saying that the chat function and the banter on Microsoft Teams makes her feel sometimes like she's got a class of 30 children in her living room. I'm not sure if you've experienced that. But I think with teenagers, the ideal, and it's not always easy, is to move to arm's length supervision if possible, so that you're sort of keeping an eye and keeping an earshot, but hopefully the children are trying to do some of the learning for themselves and don't need you there all the time. So again, prioritize well-being and not productivity, because this is a really stressful situation for your teenagers. And in the end, I would say your relationship with your child is the most important thing of all, and that has to take priority over learning. Sorry, could somebody turn mute on? I think we get.
Okay.
Ayan, can you switch your mute on? Okay, I'll try and continue. Keep to the perspective of, will it matter in 6 months if my child didn't complete the entire French lesson this morning? Probably not. So again, it's keep it in perspective. If they're being really challenging, try and just keep it to whatever they enjoy doing best. So keep the enjoyment in the learning. That's so important. Stay calm. They may take it out of you, and try and step away if needed. Audrey, I think you were going to do this slide.
It's over to me, and it's gaming and electronics. This is something that I'm sure that all of us parents can relate to. And I just wanted to speak a little bit about it today, because I think as parents, it becomes, with the child, it can become parental attitude is it's bad, and child attitude is it's good. And as parents, we kind of end up tending to police, to nag, to threaten, whether it's the PS, the PlayStation, the Xbox, Nintendo Switch, Minecraft. We tend to, some people have said they'll unplug the internet, they'll ban the use of it. And Abigail told me of one strategy today, I'm not sure if it's what she uses, is take the fuse out of the plug, which I'd never heard of. Can't imagine what's happened there, why it's not working. So I think what I want to try to speak a little bit about today is about what is your child's experience, so they enjoy it and they think it's fun. So it's trying to create a positive attitude about dealing with gaming and electronics. It's a fact of life. They're not going to go anywhere, and it's something that we have to try to manage. Share their interest and what they enjoy about it. And that might mean sitting down, spending 5 minutes actually doing the game with them, asking what level they're at, what do you need to do to get to the next level, or who are you playing with, or how did you make that on Minecraft. These tiny little things can show your child that you're interested and you understand. And actually, it's quite a nice way of your child to see that, hey, they're much better at it than you are, and to have a little bit of a laugh together. So try to share their interest. And it's about socialising with their friends. And I think Abigail said that, especially for teenagers at this time, socialisation at that age is just so important. That connection with their peer group is very, very important. So try to be a little bit understanding at this time that this is the contact that they have with their friends. I'm not saying that because we've got to think that the child is finding it fun, it's about spending time with their friends, that means it's carte blanche, they can go on it wherever they want. I think there still has to be firm boundaries, and we keep coming back to timers and to schedules, but I think that's so important, that there are boundaries around, right, look for a compromise together. Once you've done your work, or at a lunch break, you can have half an hour. After you've finished your work at the end of the day, you can have an hour, so that it's quite clear what the boundaries are and what the time slots are. But I think it's very important that we try to approach this positive. Many of the parents, and I can understand because I can relate to it myself as a parent with my own son, it can become almost a bit of a battle. You're not going on, you're not going on, and actually try to step away from that and just to come at it from a more positive way. As I say, they're not going anywhere, and it's something we're going to have to learn to live with, and your child as well. And it's important that you teach them about a life skill, about how they can manage their time on gaming and electronics. Because as they get older, it might be surfing the web, on their iPad, on their computer. So all of these things, because what we've said earlier, spending all your time on a screen, it is not good for anybody. Now, what I am going to do, I'm just going to, Abigail, are there any questions on the chat that needs? Because what I thought I'd like to do now is just to give 3 sample questions and answers that we had from parents before, that we collated from parents. Yeah, Abigail, were you going to say something?
Yeah, I'm wondering if at this stage, before we do this, if anybody's got burning questions, if we're going to turn the recording off, just so that if anybody's got any of their own questions, or